Imagine being born and raised in London.
Okay.
You've spoken English every single day of your life. You went to school in English. You argue with your friends in English. You literally dream in English. And then,
Let me guess. You sit down to take a C2 English proficiency exam, the absolute highest level, and you fail.
exactly, you just completely fail it,
Yeah, it happens far more frequently than people actually realize.
which is just wild to me.
Right, because the assumption that being a native speaker automatically grants you mastery over the language is, well, it's one of the most pervasive myths in linguistics. We tend to conflate the intuitive ability to order a coffee or tell a joke with the actual cognitive architecture required to deconstruct a dense academic text.
Or mediate a high-stakes corporate negotiation, right?
Precisely. They're entirely different skill sets. It's a completely different ballgame.
And that distinction is exactly what we are dissecting today. So, welcome to the sixth and final deep dive of our English Learning Challenge.
The grand finale.
The grand finale, exactly. We have spent the last 5 sessions, constructing the foundations with you, moving from the essential survival vocabulary of A1 all the way through that operational fluency of B2 and C1.
And today, we are attempting to conquer the summit.
We're looking at C2, mastery on the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. And to understand what this summit actually entails, what it looks like up there, we have pulled together a highly specialized stack of sources.
We've got some fantastic material today. We are looking at linguistic framework guides from My Linguistics in Cambridge, plus some really advanced syllabus outlines from Mobility Friends.
And a couple of really revealing academic papers too, right?
Yeah, 2 deeply empirical papers. One is a study on the cognitive impacts of language mastery, published by European Science Publishing, and the other is just an extensive analysis of career velocity from the journal Computer Fraud and Security.
So our mission for this deep dive is basically threefold. First, we need to redefine what C2 proficiency actually looks like in practice. Exploring that jarring paradox of why native fluency does not equal language mastery.
Right, which is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Definitely. Second, we're going to look at the hard data, the staggering career, financial, and life satisfaction metrics that prove why reaching this level is arguably the most lucrative investment you can make in yourself.
It really is an investment.
And finally, we are going to actually open up the C2 toolkit. We'll demonstrate the precise, highly nuanced linguistic strategies that separate a good speaker from an absolute master.
So to start, I think we have to strip away the colloquial definition of fluency, because if you look at the Cambridge guidelines and the syllabus for Mobility Friends, they define C2 as near native proficiency,
Right.
which implies this effortless command over virtually all forms of written and spoken language. But the defining characteristic, the actual line in the sand separating C1 from C2, is the capacity to recognize implicit meaning.
Implicit meaning. So basically reading between the lines.
Exactly that. At B2 or even C1, your cognitive energy is largely spent just, decoding what is explicitly stated.
Right. You're processing the vocabulary, making sure the grammar makes sense to get the literal message.
Yeah. But at C2, the literal message is just the surface layer. You are instantly decoding the sarcasm, the irony, the subtle cultural allusions, and honestly, most importantly, the strategic omission.
Omissions, like what they leave out.
Precisely. You are interpreting what the speaker specifically chose not to say.
Oh, wow. That takes a lot of mental agility. And the Cambridge materials also emphasize this idea of extreme auditory flexibility.
Absolutely.
It's not just about understanding a perfectly articulated news broadcast where everything is clear.
Yeah.
It's the ability to sit in a chaotic room, listen to a rapid-fire argument between 3 people with varying regional accents.
Like a thick Scottish brogue, an Australian cadence, and a South African dialect all at once.
Right. And you have to follow the thread without missing a single beat. You aren't thrown off by background noise or people talking over each other.
And on top of that, you must be able to take that chaotic input, synthesize those conflicting viewpoints, and restructure those complex arguments into a coherent, persuasive narrative of your own.
Instantly.
Instantly. You are constantly assessing the register of the room and adapting your own tone to match the social or professional context seamlessly.
Which, I guess, brings us right back to the premise we opened with. The My Linguistics source highlights this phenomenon. They call it the native speaker paradox.
It's a fascinating concept.
It argues that C2 represents a highly educated, essentially academic command of the language. Therefore, a native speaker without extensive reading habits or formal academic training might genuinely fail a C2 assessment.
They would very likely fail the reading comprehension and advanced writing sections, yeah, because native fluency guarantees grammatical intuition and conversational ease.
The language flows out of you without conscious friction.
Exactly. But it does not guarantee a sophisticated lexicon or the analytical skills required to parse a structurally labyrinthine text.
Hold on, let me just make sure I'm wrapping my head around the mechanics of this. Because if someone has spoken the language for 30 years, shouldn't they instinctively just know the vocabulary? Or is this an issue of the exam testing something other than pure language?
Well, it is testing the intersection of language and complex thought. The My Linguistic source provides a really perfect scenario to illustrate this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a brilliant university student majoring in European history. They are a native English speaker. In their specific domain, they operate at a C2 level.
Because they read that stuff all day.
Right. They can effortlessly consume, synthesize, and debate incredibly dense, abstract academic texts concerning, say, 19th century geopolitics.
Because they have spent years building that specific lexical framework.
Yes. Now, take that exact same native-speaking student and hand them a highly specialized, structurally complex research paper on quantum mechanics or organic chemistry.
Ah, I see.
Suddenly, they stumble. They encounter unfamiliar syntactic structures that are specific to scientific writing. They lack the specific vocabulary to unlock the nuanced arguments.
They struggle to extract that implicit meaning you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Because C2, by the CEFR definition, implies a universal elastic flexibility. It's the ability to navigate complex subjects even when they fall way outside your immediate comfort zone.
So it demands an intentional, cultivated engagement with diverse texts over a lifetime. It's not just something you pick up at the grocery store.
Not at all.
So if native fluency is basically knowing how to drive a car perfectly well on your daily commute, C2 is being a professional off-road rally driver.
I love that analogy.
Right. Because you aren't just operating the vehicle, you possess the specialized knowledge to instantly recalculate your route when the terrain abruptly shifts from asphalt to mud. And you have the mechanical understanding to dismantle and rebuild the engine if necessary.
That touches on the mechanism perfectly. A daily commuter only needs the car to function under predictable conditions. But a rally driver understands the underlying physics of the vehicle and the terrain.
So C2 is understanding the underlying architecture of the language.
So intimately that you can manipulate it to survive unpredictable, high-stakes environments.
Which transitions us perfectly into the tangible payoff of all this. Because if achieving C2 requires this almost academic rigor, this relentless, cultivated engagement with complex texts, why should you, the listener, subject yourself to that grueling training?
What's the ROI?
Exactly. We are moving from linguistic theory into hard, empirical career data now, and honestly, the return on investment here is staggering.
It fundamentally alters the trajectory of a professional life. There's this study published in Computer Fraud and Security by researchers Wen and Cao, and it provides a fascinating quantitative analysis.
They tracked, what, 500 professionals?
Yes, 500 professionals over a 5-year period, correlating their CEFR language levels with their actual corporate advancement.
The numbers they uncovered for the C2 achievers are almost difficult to believe. The study found that individuals possessing C2 proficiency reduced their average time to a first promotion to just 3.0 years.
Which is incredibly fast in a corporate structure.
It is. For context, employees operating at an A1 or A2 level were waiting an average of 5 years for that exact same initial step up. Furthermore, the C2 cohort achieved a massive 25% average cumulative salary increase.
25%, that's life-changing money over a career.
And perhaps most critically, they hit a 46% promotion rate. Nearly half of the individuals at the C2 level were promoted during the study's time frame.
Yeah, and when you contrast that 46% with the roughly 10% promotion rate observed in the lower proficiency tiers, well, the correlation between language mastery and professional ascension becomes pretty indisputable.
Just as a totally different bracket.
But the raw data only tells us what is happening. To apply this to your own career, you need to understand why it happens. Why does a C2 command act as an accelerant for a 25% salary bump?
The researchers framed this through 2 specific concepts, right? Social capital theory and communication competence theory.
Yes, let's break down the mechanics of those, starting with social capital theory.
Go for it.
Social capital theory basically posits that your ultimate value within an organization is not strictly derived from your hard technical skills.
Like your ability to code, or balance a ledger, or design a product.
Right. Your value is heavily weighted by your network, the strength of your interpersonal relationships, and your ability to navigate the complex social architecture of the company.
Okay, I follow.
At a C2 level, professionals possess the nuanced language required to build trust effortlessly, mediate conflicts in multicultural teams, and negotiate delicate power dynamics.
But wait, let me push back a little here. Is it truly the precise vocabulary getting them promoted? Or is it simply the case that someone who knows they speak English better than 99% of the room walks into a meeting with immense psychological confidence?
That's a fair point.
Because confidence is a massive career driver on its own. Couldn't the language just be a placebo for confidence?
It is a totally fair question, but the research points to a phenomenon called strategic communication, which goes far, far beyond mere confidence.
How so?
Confidence allows you to speak loudly and assertively. Strategic communication is about surgical precision. At B2, you are focused on making sure your point is understood. At C2, you are actively managing stakeholder influence.
Okay, give me an example of that.
You have the linguistic agility to disagree with a senior executive in a way that makes them feel respected rather than attacked. You can deliver devastating criticism to a subordinate wrapped in language that inspires them to improve rather than just demoralizing them.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's next level.
That level of diplomatic calibration isn't just confidence. It requires an expansive, highly accessible vocabulary and a flawless grasp of tone. It is a prerequisite for executive leadership.
That makes a lot of sense. It's the difference between using a blunt instrument and a scalpel. And the Wen and Cao data reveals that this advantage isn't evenly distributed across all sectors either.
No, it spikes in specific areas.
Right. The impact of C2 is dramatically amplified in international business and finance. In international business specifically, the promotion rate for C2 speakers jumps to 45%, and they capture the highest salary increases.
Well, those specific sectors function as absolute pressure cookers for cross-cultural communication. In global finance or international negotiations, survival is predicated on your ability to engage in constant, flawless code switching.
We've mentioned code switching conceptually before on this deep dive, but in this high-stakes corporate context, what does it actually look like?
It is the ability to shift seamlessly between entirely different linguistic registers within a matter of hours or even minutes.
Okay, paint a picture for me.
Imagine a C2 professional leading a board meeting at 2:00 p.m. They are employing a highly formal, rigid, structurally complex register.
Using passive voice to depersonalize risks. Dense, industry-specific jargon to establish authority.
Exactly. Then, at 6:00 p.m., they are at a client dinner. If they continue speaking in that rigid boardroom register over wine and appetizers, they will seem robotic, aloof, and incapable of building authentic rapport.
They'd alienate the client instantly.
Yes, they must instantly code switch into a relaxed, informal, yet deeply respectful register that allows for humor and personal connection. If you only possess one register, you will inevitably fail in one of those two environments.
So C2 grants you the entire spectrum.
Exactly, allowing you to calibrate your tone to the microscopic social demands of any given second.
You know, earning 25% more and getting fast-tracked to the executive suite is an obvious, tangible benefit. But what fascinates me more about this data is what happens when that daily cognitive strain of translation disappears.
This psychological relief.
Yeah, because the sources don't just measure economic output, they actually measure human satisfaction.
And this is where the C2 journey transitions from a purely economic endeavor into a profound enhancement of your lived experience. I'd argue the psychological metrics are even more compelling than the financial ones.
The satisfaction scores reported by C2 professionals in the study are staggering. On a 10-point scale, their job satisfaction hit an 8.8.
Incredible.
Their sense of personal fulfillment reached an 8.6, and their work-life balance peaked at an 8.1. These are individuals who are fundamentally thriving in their environments, completely devoid of that persistent anxiety that often plagues second-language professionals.
To understand the mechanics behind those soaring scores, we must examine the concept of cultural intelligence, or CQ, which is beautifully articulated in our source text from Interlingua Formation.
What's their take on it?
They argue that reaching the summit of a language requires an intimate integration with the social, historical, and cultural context of the speaking community. When you achieve that integration, a massive psychological weight is just lifted.
Because interactions are no longer exhausting mental math. I mean, at B2, participating in a fast-paced, multidisciplinary meeting is inherently draining. You are burning an immense amount of cognitive fuel just trying to keep your head above water.
It's exhausting.
You are receiving incoming auditory data, running it through an internal translation matrix against your mother tongue, formulating a response, translating it back into English, checking it for grammatical errors so you don't sound incompetent, and then finally speaking. It is a grueling neurological process.
Precisely. By the time Friday afternoon arrives, a B2 professional operating in a second language is thoroughly depleted. The 8.1 work-life balance score for C2 speakers isn't necessarily because they work fewer hours.
It's because the hours they do work extract a significantly lower cognitive toll.
Exactly. The internal translation matrix is entirely bypassed. They perceive and produce the language directly.
The way I visualize this transition, and tell me if this tracks with the linguistic reality, is the difference in consuming media.
Okay, let's hear it.
Operating at a B2 level is like watching a highly acclaimed, really complex film that has been dubbed into your native language.
Right.
You completely understand the plot, you know the character arcs, you can follow the action sequences, and you get the general gist of the dialogue. But you are inherently missing the original, raw performance.
The nuances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You miss the slight tremor in the actor's voice, the spontaneous, untranslatable improvisation, the specific cadence that conveys subtle emotion.
It is a functional experience, but an incomplete one.
Right. Operating at a C2 level is watching that exact same film in its original language in an IMAX theater. You catch every esoteric cultural reference, every layered joke, and every microscopic shift in tone.
You aren't just absorbing the plot mechanics. You are fully, completely experiencing the art as it was intended.
Yes. Does that analogy hold up?
That analogy perfectly illustrates the shift from transaction to connection. When you can interact with your colleagues, your clients, and your environment in that metaphorical IMAX resolution, communication ceases to be a functional transaction and becomes an authentic human connection.
And that connection feels effortless.
Completely devoid of communicative friction. That is the engine driving those immense feelings of personal fulfillment. You belong to the environment rather than just surviving within it.
Which brings us to the physiological reality of what is actually happening inside the head of someone who achieves this. We've established the career trajectory and the psychological relief, but according to the research paper by Yarpakova, published by European Science Publishing, the grueling process of reaching C2 literally alters the physical operation of your brain.
It induces profound structural and functional changes.
That sounds like science fiction.
It does, but Yarbakova's research provides a rigorous neurological framework demonstrating that the sustained mental exercise required to push through the upper echelons of language acquisition actively strengthens the brain's executive functions.
Okay, so when we talk about executive functions, we are essentially talking about the brain's air traffic control system.
That's a great way to put it.
How exactly does mastering a language upgrade that system?
Executive functions encompass vital cognitive processes, working memory, mental flexibility, and inhibitory control, which is your ability to filter out distractions.
Let's focus on inhibitory control. How does that work?
Let's look at the mechanism. When a bilingual individual operates at a C2 level, both of their language systems are constantly active in their brain. When they want to say the word water, the neural pathways for both water and the equivalent word in their native tongue light up simultaneously.
Wait, really? So the brain has to constantly suppress one language to use the other?
Exactly. The brain must continuously, flawlessly suppress the irrelevant language in milliseconds to prevent interference.
That sounds incredibly taxing.
At first it is. But because a C2 speaker has spent thousands of hours training their brain to perform this rigorous suppression of linguistic distractions, that neural pathway becomes incredibly robust.
Like a muscle.
Like a muscle. And this honed ability to filter out irrelevant stimuli organically transfers to non-linguistic tasks. A C2 speaker demonstrates significantly improved attention control. They can maintain deep focus in chaotic environments far better than a monolingual counterpart.
That is fascinating. Now, Yarbakova's study also emphasizes the development of something called metalinguistic awareness. What is the physiological or cognitive advantage of that?
Metalinguistic awareness is the ability to step outside of the language and view it as a structural mathematical system.
Okay.
A monolingual speaker uses language instinctively. They don't think about the syntax, they just use it. When you reach C2, you begin to acutely notice structural patterns, the subtle nuances of word formation, and how syntax actually manipulates thought.
So you see the matrix code behind the words.
Exactly. You see the code.
And seeing that code changes how you approach problem solving in general.
Fundamentally. Because you have spent years comparing conflicting grammatical structures, searching for equivalent expressions across vastly different cultural paradigms, and interpreting meaning based on subtle contextual clues, you develop profound cognitive flexibility.
I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of cognitive flexibility. Is it fair to compare a monolingual brain to a train running on a single, highly efficient track?
Okay, let's play with that.
The train is fast, it knows exactly where it's going, but it can only travel the route that has been laid down. If there is a massive boulder on the track, the train stops. It cannot process a way around it.
That is an excellent visualization of rigid neural pathways, yes.
So a C2 bilingual brain is like an advanced off-road vehicle. It doesn't rely on predetermined tracks. When it encounters an obstacle like a problem in the workplace or a logistical crisis, it instantly recalculates, reverses, and finds a completely different route through the terrain.
Because it is accustomed to holding multiple, sometimes conflicting maps of reality in its working memory simultaneously.
Exactly.
That is precisely how the neurological advantage manifests in the real world. The mental agility you develop through the rigorous pursuit of C2 directly transfers to complex problem solving in arenas that have nothing to do with language.
Like tech or management.
Whether you are debugging a labyrinthine software architecture or managing a multifaceted supply chain crisis, the cognitive flexibility and enhanced working memory built via language mastery make you a more formidable, adaptable thinker. It is an upgrade to your biological operating system.
That is just incredible. Well, we have spent a significant amount of time unpacking the theoretical frameworks, the hard career data, and the neurological biology of C2. Now, we need to show you exactly what this looks like in practice.
It's time for the practical application.
Yes, we are going to open up the C2 toolkit, drawing directly from our syllabus sources, and demonstrate how to construct these sophisticated interactions.
We must move from theory to application. The Interlingo source heavily emphasizes the mastery of idiomatic expressions, noting that at the C2 level, idioms are not just quirky phrases you memorize.
Right, they are indispensable tools for establishing cultural solidarity.
They use the classic example of break the ice. At a B1 level, a learner might know the literal definition, to hit frozen water, and perhaps vaguely understand it means starting a conversation.
But at C2, you understand the cultural pragmatics. You know exactly when the social tension in a room requires intervention. You can deploy the idiom naturally with the correct intonation to relieve that tension without sounding like you were just reading from a textbook.
However, while idioms are vital for social cohesion, the Mobility Friends syllabus highlights a linguistic tool that is exponentially more critical for career advancement: the mastery of hedging and softening opinions.
Hedging. This is a core component of their complex communication and debates module. Let's break down the mechanics of this because it challenges the assumption that advanced English means using the biggest words possible or being the loudest voice in the room.
Hedging is the strategic use of linguistic devices, specific verbs, adverbs, and complex grammatical structures to express ambiguity, probability, or caution.
Caution is key there.
In a high-stakes professional environment, absolute certainty is often your enemy. If you directly state your strategy will fail, you have backed the other person into a corner.
Right. They must now defend their ego, which completely destroys collaboration.
Exactly. C2 mastery is recognizing that the ultimate goal isn't merely to be factually correct. The goal is to be persuasive while preserving the relationship and the social capital.
So hedging is essentially diplomatic judo. You are redirecting their energy rather than meeting it with blunt force.
I love the term diplomatic judo.
And to execute that level of diplomacy, you need precise vocabulary.
Specifically, you need the vocabulary outlined in the Oxford 3000 B2C1 list provided in our sources. Words like consequence, contemporary, objective, complex, sophisticated, crucial, obligation, implement.
These are the architectural building blocks of advanced hedged thought.
Yes.
Let's do a practical demonstration. We're going to role-play a few distinct corporate scenarios to show the messy process of building a C2 sentence. I am going to play the role of an enthusiastic, perhaps slightly frustrated professional operating at a solid B1 level.
Okay, I like this.
I'll give you my raw, unpolished thought, and I want you to surgically elevate it into a persuasive C2 level argument using hedging and advanced vocabulary.
I am ready. Give me the first scenario.
Scenario 1. We are in a tense board meeting. The executive team has just introduced a new remote work policy that I think is terrible. My B1 instinct is to say, The new rule is bad, and it will cause a lot of problems at work. We need to stop it.
Okay, the core message is obvious, but the delivery is aggressive, simplistic, and entirely lacks analytical depth. It invites immediate defensiveness. To elevate this, we need to remove the subjective judgment, like the word bad, replace the absolute certainty of will cause, and reframe the demand of need to stop.
How do we restructure it?
We use a concession clause to validate their effort first, followed by a hedged concern. Integrating words like contemporary, complex, consequence, and objective, it becomes. While I appreciate the intention behind implementing this contemporary policy, I am somewhat concerned that it may inadvertently yield a myriad of complex consequences for our daily operations. Given our overarching obligation to maintain efficiency, it seems crucial that we objectively reassess this directive.
Wow. That is brilliant. Let's look at the mechanics of what you just did. My B1 version, it will cause problems, was an absolute attack.
Right.
Your C2 version, it may inadvertently yield consequences, softens the blow with may, and inadvertently, suggesting the executives didn't mean to cause harm. You replace problems with consequences, framing it as an analytical forecast rather than a personal complaint.
And critically, I shifted the focus to a shared obligation and objective. It aligns you with the executive team's goals rather than positioning you as an adversary. Let's try another one.
Scenario 2, contract negotiation. We are dealing with a vendor who wants us to do more work for the same amount of money. My B1 brain wants to say, we're doing more work now, so you have to pay us more money.
Again, it is entirely functional, but it sounds like a demand from a hostage negotiator rather than a collaborative business partner.
It lacks sophistication.
And backing logic. We need to frame the request as a natural, logical consequence of their actions, not as a greedy demand.
Walk me through the upgrade.
We can utilize conditional structures and formal vocabulary. Given the expanded scope of the current deliverables, a proportional adjustment to the remuneration structure seems appropriate to ensure we can maintain the sophisticated level of service this project demands.
Proportional adjustment to the remuneration structure. You didn't even use the word money or pay.
No.
You framed it as an issue of geometry. If the scope expands, the structure must expand proportionally to support it.
Precisely. You are appealing to their logic. You are also gently implying that if they refuse the adjustment, the sophisticated level of service might drop, but you are doing it without making an explicit threat.
Let's do one more. Scenario 3. A performance review. I am a manager, and my employee has been missing deadlines. My B1 impulse is to say, you are working too slowly, and you are missing deadlines. You need to work faster.
This is perhaps the most delicate scenario, as direct attacks on performance severely damage morale and trigger a fight-or-flight response, completely shutting down cognitive reception.
Right, they just stop listening.
A C2 manager uses language to investigate the system, not attack the person.
So how do I tell them they're too slow without explicitly saying it?
You depersonalize the issue. Instead of "you are working too slowly," you target the process. I've noticed a slight delay in the recent deliverables. Perhaps we could examine the current workflow together to identify any structural bottlenecks that might be hindering our crucial objectives.
By saying slight delay in deliverables, you remove the word you entirely. You aren't attacking their character, you are jointly analyzing a structural bottleneck.
Exactly.
It transforms a confrontational reprimand into a collaborative problem-solving session. That is the true power of strategic communication. You are manipulating the emotional reality of the room through syntax and vocabulary.
It allows you to navigate the most treacherous professional waters with absolute grace and undeniable authority. You achieve your goals while simultaneously elevating your social capital.
This has been an incredibly profound exploration. We have covered immense ground today, unpacking the complex academic reality of near-native fluency, the astonishing career ROI and empirical data, the physiological rewiring of the brain's executive functions, and finally, the precise linguistic tools required for absolute mastery.
It has been a fitting and comprehensive conclusion to this extensive 6-part series.
It truly has. To you, the listener, take a moment to summarize this journey in your mind. Think about how far you have conceptually traveled with us over these deep dives. We began by examining the rudimentary foundational blocks of A1, the basic survival phrases needed just to exist in a new language.
And today, we have stood at the summit.
Yes, analyzing the elite, highly educated nuances of C2 that fundamentally rewire your neurology and dramatically accelerate your professional life. You now possess the complete blueprint for true mastery.
However, as we conclude this challenge, the evidence we've discussed raises an important final question, a philosophical provocation for you to ponder long after this audio ends.
Oh, I love a good provocation. What is the final thought?
We established earlier through the native speaker paradox that language is not a static monolith. It is a living, breathing organism that constantly evolves. We noted that even native speakers must continually read, engage with complex, diverse texts, and aggressively maintain their vocabulary to hold on to a C2 level command.
Right. Because the brain is ruthlessly efficient. If you stop reading and stop utilizing those complex neural pathways, the vocabulary shrinks, the executive functions atrophy.
Exactly. So the question is this. If the landscape of language is always shifting, if new paradigms of communication are constantly emerging in technology, global business, and culture, is language mastery ever truly finished?
Wow.
Or will you find yourself in the humbling, perpetual position of needing to constantly relearn, recalibrate, and remaster parts of your own mother tongue in the decades to come, simply to maintain your footing at the summit?
That is a brilliant and somewhat intimidating thought to leave on. The summit isn't a plateau where you could just sit down and rest. It's a peak where you must actively, continuously hold your ground against the wind.
Well said.
What a phenomenal journey this has been. Thank you profoundly for joining us on this deep dive, and indeed throughout this entire 6-part challenge. We warmly encourage you to keep reading complex texts, stay relentlessly curious, and continue building and refining your magnificent linguistic architecture. Until next time.